Ever since the creation of mankind, there have been wars and warriors. Those warriors risk their lives for their country by putting themselves in combat zones in hopes of defeating the enemy. They often find themselves in life or death situations and must make decisions under pressure, under fire, and undermanned. These types of extreme high-risk situations, leadership and execution are crucial to achieving success, and the same strategies that are successful in battle can often be translated to business. 2,000 years ago, the war strategist Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, which became widely read by both military generals and business leaders. The same can be said about the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. These two U.S. Navy SEAL officers led the most highly decorated Special Operation Unit of the Iraq War. They now run a leadership consulting firm that teaches people how to apply powerful leadership principles from the battlefield to business and life. Every chapter in the book follows the formula of starting with a military story, then talking about the principle learned, and ending with how the lesson can be applied to the business world. One of the chapters starts with Jocko learning that his team, which was filled with Navy SEALs, had to fight alongside Iraqi army soldiers. This may not seem like an issue, but remember, Navy SEALs are like a professional sports team. They are a tight-knit group of soldiers with hundreds of hours of training, in peak physical condition, and have access to some of the best technology in the world. Compare that to the Iraqi soldiers, which were mostly uneducated, untrained, undernourished, and unmotivated. Most of the soldiers had joined just for a paycheck, and more often than not, when there was a real fight, they ran away. Now, Jocko's commanding officer was saying that to go on missions, the SEALs had to work with the Iraqi soldiers. Jocko wondered why his boss made such a bad decision. After taking a step back and questioning his leaders, he began to see the logic behind the decision. In order for Iraq to become a stabilized country, they needed to have well-trained soldiers that could handle problems on their own. If they didn't learn once the US soldiers left the country, the terrorist groups would retake the entire area. When Jocko first told his troops about the new rule, the team was furious. After explaining the reason behind it, they too realized the logic of the decision and agreed it had to be done, even if it was risky and unpleasant. The lesson from the story is that to be a great leader, one must truly believe in the mission. If a leader doesn't understand the decision made by his boss, they must ask why and learn the reason behind the decision. Once the leader understands why, he could communicate the mission with confidence to everyone below him. Now let's look at a business application of principle. A company recently implemented a new compensation structure for their sales force, but it created stress and fragmentation among employees because none of them understood why it was changed. Employees complained to Jocko and said that they believed the new structure would drive a large part of the sales force away. Jocko asked the group why leadership changed the compensation structure, but no one could answer the question. Jocko then asked if they thought the CEO was unreasonable or inexperienced. The group said no, and added that the CEO is smart and that they feel stupid questioning the CEO. As it turned out, none of the employees understood the reason behind the CEO's decision, and all of them were too scared to ask why. Meanwhile, the CEO, with all her years of business experience, thought it was easy to understand why the changes were necessary. Jocko recommended that the CEO hold a meeting where she could answer any and all questions that the employees may have. The next day, the CEO held a meeting that went over the new plan and answered all the questions that the employees had. Now saw the logic behind the decision and understood the mission. The next story begins with Leif Babin and his SEAL team in enemy territory on a wide open rooftop with no cover. Earlier in the day, they had been engaged in a firefight and were firing from inside a small building. When they tried to exit, they saw a possible IED, improvised explosive device, near the building entrance. They placed their own explosive nearby to destroy it. It was set on a timer and the clock was ticking. Now they had to find another way out of the building and get away from the blast radius. They decided to head to the roof, but while on the roof, one of the SEALs walked over a plastic tarp that covered a hole and fell 20 feet to the ground. Now they were exposed out in the open with an IED set to explode and the SEAL separated from the team and in need of medical support. In this high-risk and unforgiving environment, every second counted. Babin thought back to his training and remembered that when there were multiple challenges, the most important thing to do is to remain calm, take a step back, and determine the greatest priority for the team. In this situation, it meant setting up security because if they didn't protect themselves, they wouldn't be able to help the injured seal. Next, he had to find a way to get everyone off the rooftop. They found a small, locked stairwell and broke it open. After making their way down to the wounded seal, they took a head count to make sure they had everyone. As they made it to the safe zone, the explosive went off and destroyed the IED so that no other soldiers would be killed. In this story, we learn that whether on the battlefield or in the business world, when there are countless problems and challenges, it's important to relax, look around, and make a decision. The lesson also applies to the business world. As a consultant to a pharmaceutical company, Jocko spoke with the CEO and went over the list of new initiatives the CEO planned to implement to help the company improve its performance. The CEO wanted to launch several new products, create new distribution centers, enter the lab equipment market, start a new training program, rebuild the company website, and restructure the sales force. With so much to do, it could become confusing to know which task is the most important. Jocko asked the CEO which initiative had the highest priority, and if the CEO believed his team knew which task was of highest priority. The CEO admitted that his team probably wouldn't know, and that if they did just focus on one task, it would make a huge difference to the company. Jocko recommended that the CEO focus just on one task, and once completed, move on to the next highest priority. Once the company unified itself on a singular initiative, progress was seen quickly and gained momentum. The third story begins on a rooftop with Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in U.S. history and the author of American Sniper. Chris told Leif that he saw a guy with a scoped weapon in a building. The man stepped behind the window, but then disappeared behind a curtain. But not too far away, there were a group of U.S. soldiers on the ground. Chris wanted to protect his fellow soldiers and take out the sniper, but he couldn't positively identify the man and wasn't sure if it was an enemy or friendly. Chris asked Leif what he should do. Leif knew that if they waited too long, they worried that the man might shoot one of the soldiers. But if they took the shot and it turned out to be a friendly soldier, it would be just as bad. Leif then radioed the other platoon and asked them if they had any soldiers inside the building. The company commander replied no and said to take the shot. The man behind the curtain came out again, but neither Chris nor Leif were certain it was an enemy. However, Leif couldn't just wait there and risk the possibility of the man shooting other soldiers. So instead of just waiting, he decided to take action and radioed the commander to send troops to clear the building. The soldiers went inside the building, and after a couple minutes later, they came rushing out. It turned out that the man in the window was in fact a U.S. soldier. The building number had been miscommunicated. In Ramadi, there were no address numbers nor street signs, and the buildings were constantly changing due to destruction from bombs and bullets. All of these factors made it difficult to properly communicate the building location, an event that happened often in this chaotic environment. From this story we learn that even in times of uncertainty, leaders cannot be paralyzed by fear. This results in inaction. Leaders must make the best decision they can based on the information that they have. Now let's look at how this principle applies to business. While advising a software company, Jocko met with the CEO. She had two senior engineers that were constantly butting heads and insisted that the other person be fired or they would quit. The CEO wasn't sure what to do because she didn't want to lose either employee, but knew that both employees were creating a harmful environment for other employees. The CEO tried to take the engineers to dinner to discuss the situation and solve the issue, but nothing worked. The CEO wasn't sure what to do and instead chose to do nothing. Jocko informed her that a CEO must be decisive and willing to make choices or she will be seen as a weak leader by her peers. Jocko also told the CEO that those two employees had bad attitudes and are probably spreading negativity among other employees. This was not the role model behavior that a leader should have. Even if one employee was fired, it was highly possible that the one that stayed would cause problems with the next senior engineer. With all this information, the CEO decided to take action. She spoke with the lead developer and asked for two candidates that were ready and eager to step up. The CEO discovered two workers that had critical knowledge of the projects and were happy to work together. She then contacted HR and told them to terminate the two badly behaved senior engineers. Now the company was back on track and it was game on. Now let's review the principles that we learned. To be a great leader, one must truly believe in the mission. If a leader doesn't understand why a decision was made by his boss, he must ask why to learn the reason behind it. Once the leader understands completely, he can communicate the mission with confidence to his team. When there are countless problems and challenges, it is important to step back, relax, look around, identify the highest priority and execute, then move on to the next highest task. Lastly, even in times of uncertainty, leaders cannot be indecisive. This results in inaction. Leaders must make the best decision they can based on the information they have. Implement these principles in your job and personal life to become a better leader and achieve greater success.